Hi, I'm Ken Jacobson, Senior Documentary Programmer, AFI Festivals. Welcome, everyone. We're thrilled to have with us Jerry Risius and Beth Levison, the directors of Storm Lake, and special guest Art Cullen, the editor of the Storm Lake Times. Our moderator for this conversation is Margaret Sullivan. Margaret Sullivan is the media columnist for the Washington Post. Before joining the Post in 2016, she was the New York Times public editor and previously the chief editor of the Buffalo News, the largest news organization in upstate New York, and also her hometown paper. Margaret is the author of Ghosting the News, Local Journalism and the Crisis of American Democracy, published last year. She was recently awarded the 2020 Bart Richards Award for Media Criticism for her Post columns covering a wide range of topics, all of which makes her the perfect person to moderate this conversation. Margaret, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Ken, and welcome to this great panel, the filmmakers and of course the star of the film, Art Cullen. It's great for me to be here because I'm so deeply interested in local journalism, in local newspapers, and worried about their future. So I think we'll have a great discussion. So I'd like to start off with Beth and Jerry. If you could just talk a little bit, each of you, about how this film came to be and what the impetus was. Maybe I know Jerry has sort of a personal connection, so we'll start with Jerry and then over to Beth.
Thank you, Margaret. Yeah, I can say that I'm originally was born and raised on a small farm, actually an hour and a half away from Storm Lake. So I knew about Storm Lake. I didn't know Art at all growing up. We're actually not that different in age. He's almost like a big brother, or he could be. He's actually younger than my older brothers. So in the spring of 2017, I was, of course, watching the Pulitzers come out as they do every year, and I saw the headline, this particular Pulitzer Prize announcement, which was small Northwest Iowa town wins Pulitzer Prize. And I'm used to seeing New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, different newspapers that win the Pulitzers. And so I immediately was drawn into the article. I saw what Art had done. I went to the Storm Lake Times digital, read his articles, and then called him to see if he'd be interested shortly after of me coming out to do a little filming with him later that year. I think it was in April, and then I came out in September of 2017 to visit my parents. So I spent an afternoon with Art. We hung out, went for there's a few classic scenes sort of in the film from that first shoot, which was Art pulling 7 single-dollar bills out of a styrofoam cup, and I realized, like, this is dire, right? This is when you're counting single-dollar bills, like you're not making it. So I came home. I cut together a little bit of a character reel. I started reaching out to Beth early, but Beth was very busy, and I kept on nagging her, I guess, over the course of a year to see if I could get some help in trying to look for funding and try to make this movie, which then, because we also teach together at the School of Visual Arts in New York, she eventually came to see the what was important about the film, really.
Great, thank you. And obviously this is a really great partnership you guys have. It works very well. So Beth, talk to us a little bit about how the idea seemed to you and how you came to be interested in it.
Well, it's funny. Just now, I just realized that both Jerry and I came to the film because of newspaper stories. So the newspaper drove us to the story about a newspaper. But Jerry, we do teach together. We had wanted to work together. I'm not sure we wanted to work this closely and for this long together, but it's been great. But we knew that we really wanted to work together, and he had reached out and I wasn't able to jump on board. And then, it turned out that one day in July of 2018, Art had published an op-ed in the New York Times called "In My Town, We Need Immigrants Too." I feel like it's as relevant now as it was then. And Jerry reached out to me to read it. and I did, and it made me cry. And then I looked at the character reel, and then I also thought, wow, this person has a voice and has something to say, and there seems to be something here. And so that's the moment, you know, like I feel like these like things can happen in a flash, and that was the flash.
Great, thank you. Well, Art, I want to bring you in now and ask you, you know, toward the end of the film, I was heartened to see that there was some sort of encouraging news about how things were going. And it occurs to me that a lot has happened even since then, and it's such a struggle every day. I'm wondering what the status is right now of the Storm Lake Times.
Well, the pandemic, as you can imagine, was terribly difficult. Our advertising just jumped off the cliff and went to zero. And so we had a very difficult first quarter this year. And we're just starting to see things thaw out a little bit. But what we've realized is that over the past 5 years, we've completely lost the advertising model. The community newspapers were the last to go. You know, the regional papers like the Des Moines Register, the Buffalo News took a hit earlier than we did. But ours was more severe, really, just in terms of scale, and because we just went to zero. And so it caused, and like I say, we lost a fair amount of money in the first quarter. March stabilized some. April, we probably lost a little bit of money, and we're hoping that we'll come back in May. But those ads aren't coming back, and that we know. And so we're trying to build our product on reader revenue alone, much like the Washington Post, New York Times, and Minneapolis Star Tribune.
It's very, very challenging to replace that print advertising money that sustained us all for such a long time. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I was taken by a moment in the film in which it's pretty glancing, but someone said, I think it was your ad salesperson, who said that winning the Pulitzer actually made it harder to sell ads and made things somewhat more difficult in the community. And I would love to know more about that. I guess off the top of my head, I would have thought, wow, people would be so proud and thrilled, but that may not be the case. I mean, maybe it was the subject matter of the Pulitzer, which was definitely challenging powerful institutions, but talk to us a little bit about why that was.
Well, first of all, as Jerry could appreciate, you never drive a fancy pickup around town. And of course, when we won the Pulitzer, we said so. And you know, people think, okay, you're a little highfalutin there. And but more important, it was really that our circulation was stable to slightly increasing. But we really lost all our advertising, all ag advertising, when we did a series of editorials that won the Pulitzer about secret money, dark money invading the courts over a agricultural pollution lawsuit. And it was all really a series of editorials on transparency in the courts and on the intersection of ag and the environment, but people took it as an attack on farmers. Yep. And it's not an attack on farmers, it's an attack on the ag chemical supply chain that treats farmers as its pawns and puppets.
Right. Well, it's really important work, and it's what we're supposed to do, but it's not really a recipe for popularity, I guess.
No.
So back to Beth and Jerry, I know that the pandemic hit while you were making the film, and you know it has been very challenging for everyone. How did that affect what was happening, and how did you adjust?
We benefited from me being my day job is as a cinematographer. So I have a camera in my basement, and so once we realized that we were not going to be able to travel to Storm Lake to try to cover this, we started conducting interviews, Zoom interviews, full screen, and several of them are in the film. And you know, even through the tinny, poor audio, I believe it actually, in that kind of raw sense, it really helps, you know, what's happening. We also use the newspaper, the headlines. We did you know, an editing job with the headlines, with the Zoom, and then we also employed, or didn't employ, but asked Art's wife Dolores to go out and shoot some of the empty streets for us. So we were trying to get a sense of what the community was like, what was happening with the newspaper, what they were reporting, and then just also the personal feel of what was happening with the Cullens during COVID.
Yeah, but it was also a really, I mean, it was a really scary moment. Of course, we were really concerned for the people of Storm Lake. We were really concerned for the Cullens, and we were, you know, we were concerned for the film. What were we going to do? Because we didn't feel like we could travel there. We didn't know if it was safe, but it really did become this meta moment. If this was a film that we wanted to, that we hoped would show the value of local news, we decided let's really lead into the newspaper as much as we can to tell its story. If the Storm Lake Times is telling the story of Storm Lake, let's really lean into that paper. So it ended up being this kind of creative opportunity that really supported the themes and the message of the film in some ways. But it took a ton of work, and Jerry shot that newspaper. We shot the newspaper many, many, many times. So yeah, to sort of get it, to tell that story through the paper.
Right. Well, it definitely becomes a part of the film in a compelling way, but I'm sure it brought many, many challenges that weren't anticipated. You know, one of the things I'd like everybody to chime in on in turn, I guess, is, you know, we all say, and it's sort of become standard to say, well, local journalism is an important, you know, part of democracy. You know, everybody sort of says it, but it's a little hard to bring the point home to people, I think. And so I guess I would ask each of you to talk about what that actually means. How is it? What does it do that helps us, you know, be a country that works?
Well, my son Tom, you know, covers the Buena Vista County Board of Supervisors, which is where this lawsuit over water quality and agriculture emanated. And if nobody was covering the Buena Vista County Supervisors every week, nobody would have ever known that they were using a secret fund to cover their defense. And at a certain point, it becomes a question, okay, if the city of Des Moines wins this huge water pollution lawsuit, will the cost of it be assessed to the taxpayers of Buena Vista County? Or because they didn't have an insurance policy, insurance didn't cover them. So, you know, that's just a specific example right there. Nobody would have ever known a thing about it were it not for the Storm Lake Times.
So it's that watchdog role, in other words.
Right, or just running the school lunch menu so you know what your grandson is eating on Wednesday.
Right.
Those are all things that stitch together a community and give us a common thing to talk about. Oh, they're having tater tots again? Do you see how they're feeding those kids?
Right. It's not all accountability journalism. Some of it is pretty meat and potatoes.
Or, you know, I knew Kenny Risius, Jerry's dad. I see just, you know, moved on into the nursing home. That's what's in the Storm Lake Times.
Yep, it's very personal. And thank you. Jerry, would you take this on as well? And I'm going to ask Beth to answer it as well, because I think this is really the core question here.
I think, you know, spending time with art, it's always been important, I think, for me as well. I grew up with a weekly, you know, Buffalo Center Tribune newspaper. So it's been important for me. I remember as a high school football player being on the front page and joining the Peace Corps and being on the front page of you know, of the local newspaper. So it's a point of pride. It's a point, as Art says, it's a point of really the community coming together and celebrating and mourning in each other's losses in so many ways. As I think Art says, you know, who's married, who got married and who's been buried, you know, so it's the gamut from life to death, you know, of a community. I do think, though, that one of our hopes in the film is as a or a micro sense of what Art and his family are doing. Has macro universal values to what it is important, and it's a lot of it is civic engagement. A lot of it is where's my money going. Some of it's watchdog, but also it's the community building and who we are. We want to make sure that we are happy with who we are at the end of the day and how we define ourselves. So it also can be very existential in that way.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. And Beth?
Yeah, I don't know if I have so much that I can add to that, but I do think in the making of the film, I really learned that a newspaper can only be as healthy as its community, and maybe that a community can only be as healthy as its newspaper. And I think that we saw that in all kinds of ways. I mean, we saw how Tom Lane ran for city council because he saw that there was an opening on the city council in the newspaper. So it's a way for people to get involved, and it really is a way for people to get on the same page. And my local newspaper growing up was the Berkshire Eagle, and in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And I do think that there's something about a newspaper allows everybody to be seen and to be heard, and small victories are celebrated and big victories. And I think that that's important. I think a lot of people don't feel seen or heard, and I think a local newspaper can provide that in ways that absolutely a national newspaper just won't. So I think all those things.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things is that, the news media is not very well trusted these days, but we learned that actually local journalism is relatively well trusted. So Art, I'm going to come back to you. Beyond subscribing to the paper or buying the paper, I'm often asked this, so I ask you, maybe you have a better answer than I do. What can people do to support this mission? What actions can they take besides the obvious, which is subscribing to the local paper?
Well, one thing we've started is something called the Western Iowa Journalism Foundation. The Storm Lake Times, the Carroll Times Herald, which is about 60 miles from here, a Latino newspaper called La Prensa, and the Coon Rapids Enterprise have all started this Western Iowa Journalism Foundation, when it became clear to us that without Jeff Bezos, we needed something. And we need philanthropy to get us through this, what I consider to be about a 5-year window where we can see if we have enough audience to build readership to the point that it'll float the boat. But people need to recognize that there's going to be a philanthropic necessity for the next 5, maybe 10 years to get us through this rocky patch. And I think eventually, readers woke up during the pandemic that, freedom isn't free. And on January 6th, they learned what the result of it is. And I think the Washington Post and New York Times tell us, their circulation tells us that we can grow our readership with smart editing. And but in the meantime, we really need donations.
Right. And then there are some actions that are being contemplated in Congress that would help, I think, or at least the intention is to help. Jerry, anyone really, can you describe or, give people a sense of what these measures are and whether you think they're worthwhile?
Yeah, well, there are 2 bills in Congress at the moment. So there's the JCPA, which is the Journalism Competition and Protection Act, which is attempting to hold the big technology companies accountable. Right now, they're getting lots of news for free, and the newspapers aren't benefiting. So there's that. So you can pay attention to legislation. You can vote for the people who you think are going to protect your local news. And then, of course, last week there was the Future of Local News Act. And So I think there is a national reckoning happening now that local news is in trouble. I'm not sure if everybody is aware of it. That's something we really hope to do with this film, is shine a light, not just on the struggle, of course, but on the importance. And so saving local news. Yes, it's subscribing, it is giving, it is paying attention to legislation. And the good news is, I don't know, I just love that moment in the film where this young woman, Alondra, was reading the newspaper, and we couldn't include everything, but she was like, wow, this is so cool. I didn't know this. I didn't know this. It is really it's an opportunity for so many things to become engaged. So.
Okay, great. That's a great overview. And Art, your son is prominent in the film and is certainly an engaging character, pitching the podcast idea and having that shot down. He seems great. Actually, your whole family seems great. What do you tell young people, and some of it is pretty close to home, who are interested in journalism? Is it worth their while? Is it going to be there for them? What do you say? I'm sure you're asked this a lot.
Well, Margaret, as you and I both know, it's never been worth your while in the community newspaper business. I started at $100 a week back in the day. But what I do tell anybody is that, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein changed the course of history, if that's what you care about. Or the Pentagon Papers, or the Des Moines Waterworks lawsuit that we were involved in. We started a new conversation in Iowa, I think, about the intersection of ag and the environment. That's the only reason to get into this business. It's the only reason. It's not the money.
So
we need enough money.
If you want to change the world.
Yeah.
World.
I graduated in the first post-Watergate class, so that's what informs my thinking,
Right. I understand completely. Although I try not to let anybody do the addition and subtraction that would.
Yeah. Right. You look a lot younger than me.
Yeah. Well, it's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
So, I would also suggest that it's a lot of fun.
Right.
Often. So change the world and have some fun. It's pretty good stuff.
The most fun you can have with your clothes on, I always say.
I've heard that expression. Beth and Jerry, just coming back to you for a bit, you obviously had a vision for what this film could be. And from my point of view, it turned out great. What reflections can you offer us on what you tried to do and how it turned out? Just a little bit of summing up, I guess.
We wanted to make a really good movie. That was first and foremost, because no one's going to care if the movie isn't good. So we wanted to make a great movie. We wanted it to really show not just this family and their newsroom, but also the community of Storm Lake, which I think takes so many people by surprise, that it's so diverse. And in the middle of Iowa. And so I'll kind of speak to that. I think and then the more that we worked on the movie, the more that we came to understand the issues, the more these remarks about fake news. It just started to feel like, wow, this film is so important. So then I think for me, certainly, I felt like it was really important to get it out there as soon as we could. So for me, in the end, it was making a really good movie that would have an impact.
Good, thank you. And Jerry?
Yeah, I'll echo what Beth said, essentially, which, we know that a lot of times journalists aren't very good at telling their own stories. Like, they're very good at telling other people's stories, but they don't tell their own very well. And I had a personal connection to it, being from Northern Iowa, but I think, when Beth and I were just getting some of our first funding, we had no idea what was going to happen. So we started off going to the Heartland Forum and then getting a little bit more money, and knowing that we wanted to film continuously, if not there, then, throughout the course of at least a year, to get the seasons, to see planting, to see the 4th of July or summer celebration, the harvest, winter. And so we have all these goalposts that we thought were good for telling their story through the eyes of the Cullens and through the newspaper. So, I think at the end, Beth, what Beth said is that, you do need to have a good film in order for people to watch. It's a strong message, but we could have, we couldn't have made this in another place, I think, in so many ways.
Right,
So,
and the sense of place really comes out in such a strong way. And that's, I mean, I joked with you earlier that I felt after watching it, I felt like I had moved to Storm Lake. And I was, maybe going to sit down and knock out a story. So thank you, filmmakers. Thank you, Art. This has been a really fun discussion and an important one, I hope. And audience, please subscribe to your local paper, get your friends to watch the movie, and do whatever you can do to keep local journalism alive. Thanks so much.